couldn't be prouder to announce that today's guests are none other than my two daughters, Jasmin and Candice. They've agreed to join me for a candid conversation about their experiences growing up off the back of my playing career and the impact it had on their lives. We'll be delving into their earliest memories, exploring how my involvement in sports shaped their own aspirations and reflecting on the unique challenges they faced along the way. We'll be discussing the fantasy football sketch and how it not only affected me personally, but also left a lasting impression on my daughters. During our discussion, we'll dive into how that incident impacted them both individually and how they dealt with discrimination in their own lives. Hello, welcome to the AbsoluteLee podcast. I've got two very special guests today. It's going to be different. I'd imagine it's going to be informative. It's going to be lively. Okay, I would like to welcome my daughters, Jasmin and Candice. Welcome to the AbsoluteLee podcast. How are we?
We're good. How are you, Dad?
I'm good. How was it travelling down from up north down south?
A breeze.
It was
chaos.
a breeze, yeah?
It's always chaos.
Well, you got here. I appreciate it. And obviously we're going to talk about and recap, talk about some of my experiences and obviously how you guys have found being on the journey. And that's what I was going to ask. That's going to be my first question, really. What's it been like, for you since I really kind of mentioned the fact that, I'm going to do a podcast, and how do you feel about that? You've obviously been part of that, especially yourself with the social media, trying to help me, and you've been part of that in terms of discussion. How did you feel about it when I said to you, I'm going to do a podcast?
It's been exciting. It's a little bit daunting sometimes as you're putting yourself out there again. But yeah, it's been really exciting. It's been really interesting listening to some of the conversations that you've had. I've enjoyed it. When
you say again, is that because for people that know me, they wouldn't have seen me on social media? I popped up, the last year, very closed in that respect. So that's what you mean, right? That I've kind of took the plunge in terms of being more visible.
Yeah, you're a very private person. So to be putting a bit more of yourself out there into social media, and also the world's changed from when you were at the peak of your career. So coming back out again now into the way that the world is of social media. So yeah, it was a little bit daunting seeing all the feedback and stuff that's going to come online. It's a completely different playing ground to what you had.
Yeah, I mean, you know as well. So you've been part of the conversation. I did say to you all that I'm going to be on social media, try not to get involved in any online spats. It's just not worth it. But you've both been very helpful. I mean, what's it been like seeing me pop up and you've seen my Insta? And
it's good. It's funny. Sometimes I have to remember, oh God, I've got my dad on Instagram. And
I can see everything.
You just start loving my story. I'm like, Jason has seen me out.
I don't love everything.
Time to behave.
Oh, yeah, no. But
sometimes it's time to be a parent. I don't love everything. I see what I see, but that's my problem now, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's been your experiences growing up with a dad who played professional football?
I think, so we've talked about this kind of question. I think because I've had the longest spanning memory, given that I'm the eldest of everyone, it's been like a mixed bag. So when we was younger, I remember us going to games and stuff when we were younger, wait for my dad. I mean, probably the worst memory of you is my dad ready yet? Is my dad ready yet? We have to wait in that players' lounge for hours. And everyone's like, he's not even got in the shower, Jasmin. I'm like, for God's sake, we've been here for 2 hours. The game ended. What's happening? They're our worst ones. But I think when you're younger, you don't really take much notice of it too much. But as we started to get a little bit older, I think particularly when you probably started playing for Notts County, because that's our hometown. And I was 16 to 18 at the time. That was a lot more public, in your face for me, especially at school, having to deal with, you going in and you're critiquing my dad. I don't go onto your dad's workplace and be like, oh, you've not done this very well, you've not done that well. But I have to sit and hear that in my place of school and place of learning. Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey.
It's been a journey. What about yourself? Do you remember? I mean, obviously, there's 5 years difference.
Yeah,
we have to let people know.
I think it was much more relaxed by the time I was that age, because you'd sort of come out of the limelight a bit by that point. I don't really have anything that stands out. It was just the norm. People are like, oh, your dad's Jason Lee. I'm like, yeah, I know. My dad.
He gets on my nerves. It's that same guy.
Yeah. Whereas
it just grounded me, actually.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me
about him
again.
Guy.
Yeah, it was a bit more normal for me, I think.
I mean, listen, to put it into more context, so as you say, you would have been 15, 16. that was my last league club. Well, I went to Mansfield after. So I did full circle. You know, we moved to Nottingham when I signed for Nottingham Forest. Obviously, you was born in London, but, you know, brought up in Nottingham. You was born in Nottingham along with your brothers. So Nottingham's been our life for best part of 25 years. So that's what you know. But for me, from then I had to commute and play for teams all over the country, which we'll get back to in a later question. But, you know, it was my last stop and I wanted to make it work. And I did really well there. So I was club captain, I was scoring goals. So you would have seen the positive side, and yet there would have still been some negativity around it. But you would have seen the positive side. There was periods, you know, during my career, as you can imagine, where things wasn't going well.
Yeah,
you know?
Sitting in the stand as a family member. I used to wear my AirPods or earpods at the time when I'm out there, like listening to music during the game. Because I don't want to hear what's being said. But at the end of the day, this is my biggest pet peeve of football anyway. It's like you're talking about actual people. Like their family and friends do have to see the comments that you say. And obviously now you're on social media. That's where it's a bit like daunting and like apprehensive of you going on because like you could hear it in the stands. So like that's bad enough. But like having to like read it and stuff. But yeah, like growing up and hearing that stuff, like it's not great.
So talking about my career again, if you remember, I mean, I commuted to all of my clubs, right? You've heard me speak about this before.
Yep.
It was a family decision, a conscious decision that I made, and I know it went against the grain, against the grade, especially when I went to Watford and Graham Taylor, and we had this public, not spat, but, you know, managers like you to commute and live within, you know, half an hour radius or whatever it may be, you know, a 5 mile radius. But I just know the way the game is, and when I talk about to fans, to give them an insight that there is no loyalty in football. People don't want to hear that. You could go in on a Monday and a manager could say to you, listen, you're not in my plans anymore. You've just relocated, you've moved your family down, got a 3-year contract. You're not in my plans anymore. Go and train with the kids. Then you're like, oh, now what am I supposed to do? So I always knew in the back of my mind that, you know what, other people do it in other walks of life. I'm going to commute, get in my car. If I have to stay over, stay in a hotel, whatever it may be, do what I got to do. I mean, how was it for you? I mean, I would like to think, but you can answer this. I would like to think I was always a present parent in terms of the majority of the time I was home early. I was always there, apart from obviously when I was commuting and also apart from the time, you know, that I went and played in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you can kind of talk about that. I signed a 2-year contract, but came back after a year. And that was the only time when I played in Scotland that I was away from the home for a long period of time. So how would you have felt about the fact that, or did you even notice that I was commuting and I wasn't around? And
I mean, I think we would have preferred that than having to move with you and relocate constantly. I think that would have had a much bigger like detriment on us than you just commuting. Obviously, like Christmases, things like that, it was
that's a good point, right?
When you weren't there.
People don't realise Christmas Day.
Gone.
We don't have Christmas Day. We would start really early, and then you'd obviously go to the training ground and do your training for your Boxing Day games,
or
and then
have to commute
we'd finish it at the end of the day.
Yeah,
like
we just did Christmas later. Once you got back, we'd do Boxing Day with all the family. So you made up for it. Whether you do something early or do it late, you always.
It's that sacrifice, isn't it? Like when you're younger, I don't think we would have been like, oh yeah, Dad's commuting, is doing it for us. Like when you look back, like you say, you've pretty much played for every team within like a 2-hour radius of Nottingham. Like you've clearly done that on purpose. And Scotland was the big one, and that was probably the only team I think you played for where we actually sat down and had a discussion as a family around potentially relocating. I thank God we didn't, but like that was almost, and that was probably one of the hardest years that I think we had. I think I just got a mobile at the time. I would have been, 10? Yeah, I was just about to go into secondary
I know that was a tough period because of age as well. And the boys, you know, we're not talking about the boys. I've got 2 sons as well. Couldn't fit them all on the couch. Conversation would have been very different. But, you know, even the boys were going through what they're going through in terms of adolescence and growing up. And, you know, it's not easy for parents. You want to be there. You know, you want to ensure that you're still instilling good discipline. And, you know, I'm a disciplinarian and I always want to be in and around.
So wait till Dad gets home. Well, he's not home for another 3 days, Mum.
Right, exactly. So being away in Scotland, I would imagine, you know, was tough on your mum. She used to ring me and Yeah, but as fans, they don't appreciate that. I think when people hear it, the way I'm maybe talking, they go, okay, didn't look at it that way. But you get paid well, you play football, so therefore you should just, not complain about anything. But it's a real life, and you've got children, and you've got people who need you, so you want to be in and around them regardless of, of money. So Scotland, I know, was a test.
Definitely. And like that Christmas that we had there, all in that really teeny tiny house. And there's like 6 of us in one bedroom.
Yeah, we made it work.
And you got, your teammate in the other room, and we're trying to like make Christmas dinner and stuff. And I just remember the airport scene vividly, like us leaving. Because that's when we flew. But usually you would drive down. It's a 6-hour drive down from Falkirk.
And then
so
some,
you were doing that at least once a month to come and see us for the weekend. Actually, weekend off. And then you go back up again. They're hard. But yeah, that airport scene, remember that? And we're all just there crying. Like, we must have looked an absolute mess.
Yeah, that wasn't easy for me. But it's the bigger picture. You got to keep earning that money. Got 4 mouths to feed. And you guys like
I don't know why you're looking at me.
Like to eat. So I just had to do what I had to do. And I always tried to do what was best for you guys. That situation, actually, I had to go to Scotland because people might wonder, well, why did you go and play in Scotland? I had a period of time at Peterborough where I was out injured, ruptured my patellar tendon. I was at a real career crossroads. I was told I'd never play again, did the work. I was out of contract. It was the first time that I was out of contract where clubs were like debating whether they were going to sign me. So I've always had a club, regardless of what people think. I've always had teams. I've always been signed. But you know what? You've been injured for like 15 months. So are you really good to go? I was 30 years of age as well. And the contracts I was being offered here, I thought they were taking the piss, I'm not going to lie. But I understood where they were coming from. They were like, prove yourself, blah, blah, blah. Scotland offered me, Falkirk.
Well, they loved you in Falkirk.
They offered me a 2-year deal. I mean, it was like, okay. I wouldn't have gone up there if I wasn't okay. But for them to show that faith in me, I went up there, signed a 2-year, had a really good season. But again, I had a conversation with the manager and everybody at the end of the season said, listen, I've loved it. Everyone's been great. But we need to actually come to some sort of mutual agreement where I can actually return home, because a year away from home, I just realised I couldn't do my second season.
You didn't tell us until you'd actually got back home. Like you pulled onto the drive. And like, when you're going back, like, I was like, Dad, you've got a lot of clothes in the car. Like, what's going on? He goes, I'm back. Like, I'm not going back.
Yeah, that was nice. It was nice to be able to do that. Obviously, I couldn't discuss it and talk about it because getting out of a contract is not easy. They're thinking, well, you got another year, but come on, family first. That's the point. No point me staying here and being miserable, kicking and screaming. So it was good to be back, and things worked. I was able to get clubs, signed for Boston, went from Boston to Northampton to Notts County. So I was back home, back on the doorstep. It worked out. It worked out in the end. So I had to take that chance. Okay, so let's talk about season 1 and especially the way we kicked off season 1. When I said to you guys that, guess who my first guest is going to be? It's going to be David Baddiel. I mean, how did we feel about that?
I mean, I thought it was great.
Explain how, elaborate.
Well, I just think you finally get your closure. Although you kept yourself super composed, relaxed, you still let him know like what he's done. And you could see he was shook. I thought it was good. I don't think you agree, do you, Jasmin?
So it was a great episode. I do agree. Well, obviously, when you first found out that he was going to be the first on the episode, like, there's a little bit of conflict because we kind of knew why he was coming into the podcast. So like, there's that in the back of your head. And I mean, obviously, for those that have watched that podcast and whatnot and seen some of the stuff on social media afterwards, I'm so pleased that you've got this closure, from all this time ago, and he's finally apologised to you. And, whether people think it's sincere or not, like, you believe it is, and that's really all that matters. But for me, and there's plenty of people out there, like, it doesn't actually change the impact or the effect that show had on our lives and on, that we got so many, like, emotional stories through social media. I spent a lot of time going through it all afterwards of young children at school who were being bullied in the playground because their peers were watching the show and they thought it was all okay, like mocking their hairstyle. So there is a community out there who think, great, they're pleased for you to have your apology, but it doesn't actually change their experience, and it doesn't eradicate what they've gone through.
Yeah, but he has been held accountable. Dad literally held him accountable. Do you know what I mean?
I tried. I mean, some people don't think I was harsh enough. So when I've had conversations with them about that, I'm saying, listen, at the end of the day, I'm on camera. You're trying to do something. You're trying to have a grown-up conversation. If I'd have met him 10 years before, it would have been a different conversation, or 20 years before, we probably wouldn't have got to this point. But the fact is, the irony, I never ever met the man. The conversations were had by other people on behalf of us. I always had to deal with it every time his name was brought up, and vice versa. And he would have been on social media and I wasn't. So there was no way for me to kind of cut in and have a conversation. And I wanted to do it in the right way. I believe I'm still very proud of what we put together,
Yeah, you did it in the best way. People on social media going, oh, you should have done this, should have done that.
There's always.
Then that doesn't benefit anyone. It's just, then he looks just as much of a knob as this guy. Do you know what I mean?
I'd have been the angry black man.
Exactly. You would have just perpetuated that same narrative. At least you've come up, sat there, and he's held himself accountable. And whether his apology was sincere or not, he's shown everyone that's not okay. And he's realised whether he is being sincere or not, he's like, it's not okay. Times have changed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we won't know when people ask me. And when I say I accept his apology, whether he's sincere or not, it's about doing the work. That is pretty much our strap line. So you can say sorry, but I'm watching. We're all watching. What are you doing? Let's see how you progress, what you're doing going forward. We talk about allyship. Step out of your, we spoke about supporting the Jewish community and this, that, and the other. He had his show. I showed him that I'm prepared to be an ally and support the Jewish community. And I get it, anti-Semitism, I understand. What are you prepared to do? You're talking about your community, but what about black people? What about women? What about other areas? You've got to show people. He's got to do the work. So I ain't letting him off that lightly. I'm watching. Let's all see what he does going forward. But for him to come and sit in this studio and sit there and apologise, I had to afford somebody and give him the opportunity to do that. So let's talk. Listen, we have some great debates at the dinner table, and they can go left or right very quickly. But we're all very opinionated, and I think as parents we should be proud that we've, you've got your own voices, but the fact that you're very outspoken and you've both been to university and you've both, studied sociology, and just get into it a little bit. I mean, people become woke at different stages of their lives, didn't they? I've, as a parent, being from East London, I always try to instill some culture. You got black family, you saw them, you hear me speak patois. I just think it was really important that you felt, some sort of connection with your people then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we had to go to uni. Like you say, we had a lot of experience conversations, we had a lot of stories and stuff from you. And school at the time wasn't covering those race relation kind of topics. Going to uni, expanding my friendship group for a start, that is probably the biggest thing. I now have friends from all different races and religions, and I wasn't getting that.
Yeah, we grew up
in our town, right?
All-white village.
Right.
I think there was literally one single black man in the village, and you'd wave at him as you go by.
And there's maybe 10 ethnic minorities at our school, and I'm related to 3 of them. We didn't get that. So going to uni did that, but also from the education perspective, we were given that opportunity. I think both of our degrees had a very heavy race relation focus on it.
Yeah.
So
by choice as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought it was great because, when you came back from unis, it was double-edged sword for me. It was like, you've learned a lot. So what you've learned is now you're trying to implement that on me. I'm telling you from life experience, but you're reading from text. But you did, as you said, you learned a lot more. You're more culturally aware. You've done the history. That's a big thing. We talk about the curriculum in schools. There's not enough history done. History's being told from what perspective? It's not being told from the black perspective.
Yeah,
it's being
it's
told
all
from
just ethnocentric. It's
3 different topics, and I almost did a dissertation on this, but in the end I didn't have to do it. And I was going to do the lack of black history or the lack of black education within the curriculum at schools. It would be so easy to slot it in. Your English literature novel could be 12 Years a Slave, and you're hitting 2 stones. two birds with one stone and get your bloody things right.
With two birds with one stone.
Yeah, you could have done both at the same time, but we don't, and we choose to pick these very like bog standard texts that we've done for decades and decades now. We don't have to go and do a very, okay, we're going to do Black History this week, and we're just going to learn about it this week and then not talk about it again. It's so easy to slot this kind of stuff into the curriculum. It just doesn't feel like there's an appetite to do that from those that set those curriculums.
You know, you've got your life experiences now as well, so you become more aware of your surroundings and what's being said. And I always just try to point out to you guys, especially, you know, so you've got 4 children, you've all got different skin colours,
Bag of
different
rebels.
bag of rebels, we used to describe you as, different hair textures, very different. But, you know, you've got the same parents and you're mixed race. And so I always tried to make you guys aware. Now, I've had conversations with other people with mixed race children, and what conversation do you have with them? But I think children need to be prepared for the eventuality of when they do get racially abused or discriminated against, because it's a big shock to you. You don't want to be that blinded to the fact that I just didn't understand or didn't know what was happening. So I always tried to, you know, to say, it's hard out there, this is going to happen. And yeah, my experience, and you guys used to say it, I think, more than anybody, but we don't live in London, or we don't live in the East End of London. So I'll be telling you about my experiences, and I try and tell your brother, like, honestly, Blaze, little shout out to Blaze there, you know, same skin colour, temperament-wise, can fly off the handle. You do anything wrong growing up, I'm telling you with all your white friends, people remembering you. The amount of times people knocked on my door and said, your son, your son, your son, because you stick out like a sore thumb. So at some stage, you've got to realise that, you know what, people see me differently. And you've pointed out some good points as well, is that some people might not realise you're mixed race because you might have your hair straight and this, that and the other, and yet you've got a brother who's got darker skin. So sometimes people, there's an assumption they can have a conversation and it can be quite disrespectful, and then it's, hold on a minute.
Being at school was different. Like, I talk about this all the time. Blaze was black. Doesn't matter who you were talking to, Blaze was black. But I wasn't black because I don't have the same skin tone. And it didn't matter how many, we know we've got the same parents. It doesn't matter how many times I explained, you do realise we have the same parents. So if you say that Blaze is black, then so am I. It's the age-old thing, especially if you're mixed race, you'll resonate with it so much in that you're not white enough to be white, you're not black enough to be black. Like, where do you fit? Culturally as well. When I hang around my black family, I am the palest person in the room. I'm basically white, like, and especially if I've got my hair straight. So the fact that's difficult sometimes. I don't feel so much maybe when we go to the white side of the family, because I do have some mixed race cousins as well, but we're all white passing as mixed race cousins too. So, I mean, it might be different for Candy and the boys because they generally do have a darker skin tone than me. This is my summer tan, by the way. Normally I look like Casper. But yeah, like, that was difficult in that people just could not grasp the fact that, well, if you're going to call him black, I'm also black.
As I said, my job, I think the job as a parent is to try and, you know, and your mum as well. Obviously, you know, you remember grandma, nanny, you get both sides. You get both sides, and it's about being comfortable with both sides. I've always been comfortable with my skin. I learned at a very early age, I'm seen in this world as a black man. It is, you know, I can't pass as a white man. So when people want to be smart and want to be clever and say, but you're mixed race, yeah, but 9 times out of 10 I'm a black whatever. I've never been called a white anything. This disrespectful in my life. So, you know where you fit and be comfortable in your own skin. Do you think you'd have got to this place, or has the fact that I've been quite vocal, haven't I? I've done a lot of media over the last years, even without social media. You've seen me speaking up on a lot of topics, right? Trying to deal with social injustice. You know, has that shaped you? Have you been able to get behind that? Have you fully understood that? Has it spiked your enthusiasm for the subject?
I mean, I think we've both naturally been quite outspoken people. Anyway, I think it goes hand in hand. I'm not sure whether it's necessarily like that's what's triggered us to go and do things. I just think generally, like, we're quite to the point with things that we want to say. Like, we're not going to beat around the bush. We've been like that, I think, since we were children. So But yeah, like I think we're both definitely involved in that kind of stuff in our workplace anyway. Like you've just mentioned, you're part of your ED&I groups. I'm part of a BRG, or a business resource group. At my workplace called REACH, which is Race and Ethnic Cultural Heritage Society. So we do a lot of stuff there, doing a lot of events at work, like just kind of educating people on like a day-to-day. So heavily involved in that. We're quite like outspoken on social media too. Like, so our friends, like people that we know, they know what we're about.
All right, so as young girls growing up, did you experience any microaggressions? So we're going to get into it now. For those that don't fully understand, when we talk about unconscious bias, it's wordplay. Some people want to talk about someone's not a conscious racist. I mean, what does that mean? I always find unconscious bias is a very polite way. We're trying to find a way to not offend people by basically, not calling them racist, but whatever way you want to look at it. Microaggressions, have you experienced, any scenarios, any situations where you could say, you know what, that's not right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've experienced loads of it growing up. But I think when we were younger, we didn't have the tools to acknowledge
That's what
it was. You just thought,
it's your friendship groups as well. It's being young.
And you brush it off and you're like, you don't really think that much of it. But as you get older and you get more educated, obviously we've done our degrees, learning things from you, you then start to deep the comments and you're like, hang on.
That wasn't right. That wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
Such as what? You got to elaborate. What comments, when you look back, because that's what happens, we look back and think, now that I've got better knowledge, what happened for you to be thinking that wasn't right, now that I've got a better understanding?
So skin comparison. So constant for me, I know I'm quite like light-skinned, right? There's no melanin in me, Jesus. But it was always compare their arms to each other. Like, but I'm browner than you. And I'm like, I don't know what point you're trying to prove.
They come back from holiday and go, look, I'm blacker than you are.
Like, good for you, hun. But I'm still mixed race. Like, my dad's still, do you know what I mean? The guy's still brown. Like, it's not changing just because you've now come back and got a bit of a tan. That, and then hair.
Hair, that's a big one. We're going to get onto that. Look, I had lovely hair back in the day. I've decided to take it all off and go clean shaven, but I'll be back on the face, but not the head top. But, hair's a big thing. So people don't understand. They think, you're being overly sensitive. You've heard me talk about the fact with my hair and the dreadlocks, it meant something to me. If I could grow my hair out, I would have grown my hair out. It's deeply offensive when people want to put you down. They want to mock you. And, they might want to touch your hair. So I'm pretty sure this is going to trigger something from you guys.
Triggered. I'm triggered.
You can go for it. Hair is a big deal. It's part of your body. It's part of your identity. But people, they feel they can maybe come into your personal space. So talk to me about it. Hair.
Should we go with hair touching first?
Where do I begin?
Yeah.
I mean, I've only started my curly hair journey. Obviously, I've got braids at the minute. In 2019, it was first year of uni. Obviously, we mentioned we grew up in an all-white town. So my hair was straight from the get-go. I'd get it relaxed. I'd get it straightened to the point it literally just frazzled off onto the floor. You guys could just smell burning in the house.
I could always smell
What
cooked.
is that smell? Candy straighten her hair. It would take hours.
And what? That is to fit in, right?
Yeah, it's to fit in because you go into school,
Everyone's got straight hair.
and they'd be like, oh, what's wrong with your hair? Why does it look like that? Then I want to touch it. So yeah, I would straighten it, I'd relax it. And even then when it was relaxed, people go like, oh, why does your hair look like that?
Yeah.
Why is it so greasy? Why is it so clumped together?
Wash cycles, people couldn't get their head around that. Like,
I couldn't go swimming.
Didn't want to go swimming, right? Because who else got time? I'm not drying my hair. I'm also not going around for the rest of Friday afternoon with wet curly hair. But the wash cycles, people don't understand when you've got mixed race or afro hair. You don't have to wash it as often. Like, I could go back in the day, I don't do it anymore because I've changed my hair routine, but I could go weeks and weeks without having to wash my hair. And it would still be straight because of I was using the wrong products, right? But it would still be straight. People could not get their head around the fact that I wasn't washing my hair. Yeah, every other day.
You've not washed your hair in a week. I'm like, I don't need to.
I was like, I don't have 24 hours to do my hair again. I ain't got the time for it.
But hair can be self-cleansing. People don't understand you're just washing out the nutrients anyway.
Exactly.
By constantly washing,
and curlier hair or coarser hair textures, they need that oil. The oil doesn't go all the way down your hair. So if you wash it, your hair's going to be dry. It's going to break off. And obviously we didn't really have that knowledge growing up.
Have you taken anything away from my interviews with my guests?
Leon's episode, I don't know if it's because I know him on a personal level, but his episode really resonated with me. I really enjoyed that one. And even just the part where he was talking about growing up when his dad was trying to push, boxing on him, going, come on, Leon, you're coming for a run, what you doing? And he just turned around one day and went,
Nah, mate.
listen,
Football
I'm not
for me.
coming. It's football. And at that moment when you guys were talking about that, I got little goosebumps.
It's funny.
It's fun, but also I just love that he just owned it. It was like, because it's your dad at the end of the day, he's obviously thought, I want to impress my dad. I want to, follow in his footsteps. But then he was like, no, I need to follow my dream, do what I want to do. And I thought that was a powerful moment.
But then he went back to boxing anyway in the end. So he
Yeah.
always had a passion for it. But yeah, just you've heard me speaking to people. And also, men as well. The majority of my guests have been men and trying to get men to open up. That's important. Even for me, you guys know me well enough. I'm not a person who likes to be emotional, and it's seen as a weakness for my industry. Do you know what I mean? Men will always think can't have these conversations, and to be fair, you've tried to help me with that, and just try and share, and don't be embarrassed if I get upset, and just think it's
you've got a
important.
bit better over the years.
I've tried. I do listen, but it's still something that's inbuilt that you don't want to show, it's seen as a weakness, so you don't want to let your guard down. And you can imagine when people are coming at you, you just don't want to show them that, do you? You don't want to give them
Get it
an
in your
insight.
career. Definitely get it in your career. But like Candice said, like in your personal outside of work, there's definitely been some changes in that space. Because like you say, the emotional opening up side wasn't happening when we was younger, right? That wasn't a normal thing. But now I would say like in the last 5 or 6 years, there's definitely a different side that we're seeing, which is great. It's what you kind of need.
Yeah, and more importantly, I'm watching you guys. It's about how you develop, and as young women, hopefully, listen, you can't help it. I think as parents, you're always going to pass on baggage. You try not to. So even when people talk about their experiences and they're negative, you've got to live your life. I get that. So I'm always hopeful. I can only tell you about my experience, my negative ones, to hope that you don't have to endure that. But they are just real little markers as to just be aware always. Be aware. I'm just really pleased with how you're navigating, how you're dealing with certain situations. You're doing things differently. It's a different world. And more importantly, I tell people all the time that I don't believe in EDI experts. I believe in I've got my own experience. I can help. We're out there doing the work. You got to learn from young people. People just, dismiss younger people straight away, right?
I know, really, really
Because you've got no life experiences.
I
But
wouldn't class you as a young person, but anyway.
Applause
shots
are out.
fired today.
I just think it's important that we listen to younger people, and I've tried to listen to what you have to say, how the world is evolving, how it's changing. I've still got to fit into that. People older than myself have still got to fit into that. So what would you like to see me maybe do that I'm not already doing in terms of who I'm reaching, who I'm speaking to? What do you think I can do more in this space?
I think you're doing a lot, but I say we've only had one female guest, apart from us
I was
two,
going to say the
obviously,
same.
and we had Farah on, and maybe it's branching out into that. And I think that's what some people have asked for as well. Some of the comments, they want to see a bit more around that. I think we've touched a lot on mental health. I think it's really important. If I cast my mind back to some of the episodes that we have had, we've had quite a good breadth of conversation. So you've got DJ Spoonie, we've gone into the music world. We had Andy in, talking about media and TV. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else we want to cover. But I think for me, it's more of a female perspective around
Same.
stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we're going into the World Cup. Farah was here. Obviously, we spoke off the back of the Euros. Allyship, trying to support the women's game. You've seen with my socials, I'll try and speak about, the women's game, especially as we go into the World Cup. I'll try and raise awareness around that, raise a profile. Just think, it's big. I mean, we had, I don't know if we did it off camera, but we spoke about, did I support you enough in terms of going to play sport? So obviously the boys wanted to play football until they didn't. you know, you played all the sports at school, and I would come and watch. You know, it was netball, wasn't it, or hockey?
All of the above.
I was hockey.
You was
I was
hockey.
netball, hockey,
netball.
athletics.
I don't know what you're talking about. You didn't do all of these.
Yes,
She did athletics. I remember.
When?
She did.
I got
did
the
cross
record for the
country.
score,
She was
I
pretty
have, you know.
quick.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, you played in that cup final, and we can elaborate your cup final at Notts County, which I come to watch and sat behind the goal.
The one time
But
you
didn't
came
touch
to
the
watch.
ball. It didn't touch the ball.
Hey, I got dragged from the netball pitch to the football pitch because they're like, your dad's chasing Lee, you'll be able to play football.
Exactly.
Come on.
What a misconception
like-
that was.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't touch football with a barge pole. I was hockey girl.
Mm.
3-time champions. Just saying.
So let's be honest. Listen, your mum's the same. She would only be interested in football because I was playing. Otherwise, there's no interest. You came to some game. You came to probably very few games.
Yeah, I didn't.
Because I was
really
at the
come
back
to
end of
many.
my career.
Yeah.
So would you have any interest in football if it wasn't for me?
Yeah, give me a box and I'm going. But other than that, it's just...
No.
Bougie, yeah?
It's been my life, right? So when people always ask me this question, do you like football? Are you interested in football? I'm like, not really, no. I'm not going to lie.
Is that because, as you said earlier in the interview, is because it became quite difficult, so you couldn't even enjoy it?
The environment sometimes in football, honestly, I cannot
Yeah.
understand how aerated people can get. In those pubs, it's absolutely wild. You get so aggravated about this ball of air on the pitch.
It's
Like,
a bit
it's-
ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. So but you don't get it in any other sport. There's no other sport. Like, you're going to watch tennis and everyone's having a nice old chill time eating their strawberries and cream. Like, we get to the football game and everyone's throwing pucker pies at each other. Like, there's just no need.
All men, even when I'm doing EDI with stuff, people leave their office and they turn up at a football stadium and they lose their minds for some reason. But it's not even, listen, I've seen women do it and that's a big shock. I've played games where I've seen a family, you know, and people have got young children and they're spitting.
I just don't agree with the football
what's that?
culture. I just think
It's toxic.
it's very toxic. It's misogynistic. The amount of like domestic violence cases that go up, you know, if a team loses a game.
Those stats are terrifying. When
It's
England
just
play, it's
unnecessary.
like domestic violence increases 46% or something at home. They're terrifying. And this is just what I'm saying. I don't know what it brings out in people, but it's just a game of sport. You can't even do Sunday league football without people getting stressed.
Grassroots football's worse because there's no filter. You know, at least you're trying to say, if you can't get it right in a professional game, you're not going to get it right on a grassroots pitch, are you? And that's where it all starts. That's where we've all started. I remember having to go from, my first team I played in was an all-white team. 10 years of age, Mum took me. And also, if you want to talk about racism and microaggression and understand it, let's put it into context. My mum was white. Obviously, she's passed away. And she took me to a football team because she knew I wanted to play football and the team was white. She wasn't to understand that. She just knew I wanted to play football. So then I'm now playing in football. I'm trying to play football. I've got some talent. I'm in goal. That's the first position they decided they was going to put me, and I was in goal, and I had to earn my right to go outfield, and then I ended up being a striker. And before you know, anyway, I had to leave that team and go and play for a team that's predominantly black. That was where I was finding myself. That's from the age of 10, probably 11, 12. You know, I'm realising that I can't play in an all-white team. Because when I'm playing against another team, I'm getting racially abused. Like, you're the one person in that team. So just understanding that. But, you know, if you want to go deep, and we'll talk about being mixed race as well, I knew how bad it was, you know, for my mum. I could hear some of the comments, you know, whether she was walking with me or whatever it may be. Some of the comments, I don't even want to repeat them, but what people would say to her would be disgusting. Yeah. And also what she was really good at is she could pick up on patois and this, that and the other. You remember, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
She was never that person in the room that didn't understand if someone was cussing her.
She kissed her teeth more than you did, like, in your entire life.
Whether you're black or white, if you was going to discriminate, she would pick up on it. She could understand. But for me, that's where you have to navigate being mixed race, you know, where you fit in. But obviously you have to have that cultural awareness to give you the confidence to say that I'm comfortable, you know, in this space. So yeah, going back to earlier in the pod, when I was talking about trying to arm you and give you those tools, you know, that would have been the reasons. So as young women in the workplace, out in the world, you know, you speak to me about misogyny, I hear it. So this is why I don't just focus on race all the time. I try to focus on supporting women and the difficulties that you have to endure, the sexism in the workplace, wherever it may be. So am I doing enough in that? What can I learn? What can the listeners learn from your perspective as young women?
It's the field you work in. So I work in tech. So quite literally the number of women that work in tech is significantly lower than it should be. We have our own Women in Tech chapter where I work at the moment, and we actively go out. We've got a lot of allies and stuff, but it's trying to get that disparity kind of sorted out from a sexism kind of perspective. I don't think the language changes around women that are vocal. Like, I'm vocal, but you can sometimes be tarred with that word that begins with A, and it's like you wouldn't go and call a man aggressive, but I'm getting called aggressive. They'd be assertive, right? They'd be owning that room. It'd be all positive, but it can get switched the other way around. So that can impact like your like day to day and how you approach things. Like sometimes you feel like you have to kind of like tone yourself down and like change your personality to fit in, because you just know off the back of that conversation it could come out a particular way that if you were a male, they wouldn't be getting that kind of feedback.
No, I get it. I think you spoke before. You don't want to be dumbed down by anybody, do you?
No.
You're not having that. But listen, that's why I have to listen. I listen to your conversations. You have to keep reminding me, let me know your experiences, because I can use these experiences. I've used the ones about hair and microaggressions and this, that, and the other. They're just good little learning tools. Without context and explaining certain scenarios to people, they just don't get it, or they claim they don't get it. So you have to spell it out sometimes.
It's exhausting having to be the educator all the time, though. And this is in both. This is in like that. Being a woman, being mixed race, being a mixed race woman. It's exhausting being that person that has to go, look, you can't say that, right? And it's even more draining when they go, why not? Well, it's not. I don't think it's racist. I'm glad you don't think it is. I'm glad that you don't think that's sexist. I'm telling you that it is, and I feel a way about it. You should take that and move on. But when you have to sit and argue with people about it, it's exhausting. Like doing this job to educate people, like you just want to like live your life. It's a lot.
This is my point when people want to talk about how much change. Well, in the 30 years I've been involved in football, the dial ain't moved much. I'm still, the reason I'm out here doing what I'm doing is because people still need the work. So it can be really draining and depressing, and I have my off days, you know what I mean? But if I don't do it, if you don't do it,
who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it? I could easily be that angry person and just tell people, look, I'm not happy, but why aren't you happy? If I have to keep explaining, I'm doing it for a lot of people, really. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. But, listen, we're coming to the conclusion of this episode. And as I said, it is going to be the closure for season 1. We're obviously looking forward to season 2. Take on board, have more women, really diversify, try and get some really, really topical subjects and keep having, what are uncomfortable for other people, but just try and educate people and give them the knowledge that they need going forward. So really appreciate you both coming in, being part of this episode. We haven't fallen out.
There's still time.
There's still time. No, listen, really appreciate it. If there's any shout outs that you want to do, now's your time. If there's anything you want to say, you can say it. If not, I'm going to let you go. We're going to close it down.
Thanks for having us, Dad.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You've been part of it. You've seen it from afar. Now you're in the studio, so you've seen what it's about. Yeah, it is what it is. All good, yeah?
All good in the hood.
All good. All right. Peace. Enjoy, everybody. See you for season 2.